Madison had always carried a spark inside her, a kind of determination that no doubt or fear could extinguish. Growing up in Maplewood, Wisconsin, she dreamed of running her own business. While other kids doodled in coloring books, she filled the backs of her notebooks with sketches of handbags. Years later, after countless late nights and endless sacrifices, that dream became reality. She opened a small boutique selling handmade handbags for women. Her designs were a piece of her soul, every stitch precise, every detail intentional. Customers quickly noticed her eye for elegance, and word spread. Slowly, despite limited resources and constant obstacles, her shop gained loyal clients. Madison felt proud, though she often wished someone was there to cheer her on. For 6 years, she had been married to Ryan, a polished bank manager from Boston. When they first met, Ryan seemed attentive, protective, a man who spoke of building a stable, lasting life together. Madison wanted to believe in that vision. But over time, his care hardened into criticism, and criticism turned to control. Ryan had an arrogance that filled every room he entered. He picked apart everything, the way silverware was arranged, the outfits Madison wore to her shop, even how she displayed her handbags. "That skirt's too short for a married woman," he'd snap, eyes narrowing. "You'll waste all day in that little store and end up failing, depending on me." He monitored her schedule, mocked her routines, and dismissed her ambitions as childish. "You're not professional," he'd say, as if delivering a verdict. Madison's confidence shrank under the weight of his words. What had once felt like love became judgment, each sentence cutting a little deeper. When she tried to speak up, Ryan rolled his eyes. "Don't start with your dramas," he'd say, smirking. "I only want what's best for us. You're too sensitive." When she reminded him she was his wife, not his employee, he grew even sharper. "Without me, your shop would have failed ages ago." His words hit harder than any slap. Madison began hiding her tears, retreating to the bathroom at night to cry alone. She was exhausted, a prisoner in her own marriage, terrified of the next argument. The breaking point came one afternoon at her boutique. A customer browsed when Ryan stormed in, voice dripping with contempt. "You want to be a business owner, but you can't even keep a house." His words echoed through the shop like a public judgment. Madison's cheeks burned with humiliation, and something inside her snapped. That night, hands trembling, chest tight, she confronted him in the living room. Looking him straight in the eye, she said, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to spill, "I want a divorce." Ryan laughed, mocking. "You're joking, right?" Madison didn't flinch. "I'm not joking. I'm done living trapped in my own life. This isn't a marriage, it's a cell. You underestimated me for too long. From now on, I choose my own path." The divorce that followed was a battlefield. Ryan, with his banking connections and calculating mind, refused any fair agreements, piling on demands meant to punish her. But Madison wasn't the same woman anymore. The months ahead were heavy, nights filled with panic attacks, mornings where fear made her want to give up, but she clung to the memory of who she had been before Ryan's control silenced her. With the guidance of a tough attorney, she stayed focused, refusing to let fear dictate her life. And she fought. In the end, Madison won what was hers. She sold their shared condo in Boston and, without a word to Ryan, packed her life into her car and drove back to Maplewood. The town welcomed her like an old friend. Its quiet streets, wraparound porches, and neighbors waving from their driveways gave her the peace she hadn't realized she'd been craving. Most importantly, it reconnected her with the memory of her late mother, Patricia. Patricia had left behind a modest house, long closed and weathered. But the moment Madison turned the key and stepped inside, warmth washed over her. The air carried faint traces of coffee and laughter from days gone by. Her childhood bedroom still held the faded drawings she had made on the walls. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "Mom, I'm back." Ryan had never known about the house. Madison had kept it a secret, knowing he would have mocked it as useless. To her, it was sacred, a place where love had once lived. With the help of neighbors and old friends, Madison restored the house. They scrubbed, painted, and repaired until every corner gleamed with new life. She turned one room into a workshop, filling it with fabric, thread, and the comforting hum of her sewing machine. Using her divorce settlement and a carefully saved nest egg, she reopened her business, stronger, more intentional. She named it Patricia's Handcrafted, honoring her mother. Each bag carried a piece of her heart, a reminder of resilience and creativity passed down through generations. The town embraced her work wholeheartedly, admiring the quality and individuality of each design. Orders poured in one after another, and Madison worked late into the night, not out of pressure, but out of joy. For the first time in years, she felt free. She was no longer surviving in someone else's shadow. She was building her future with her own hands, on her own terms. The grand opening of Patricia's Handcrafted was more than a business milestone. It was a quiet triumph, a rebirth. The shop smelled of fresh wood and leather, with the faint sweetness of coffee drifting from the cafe next door. Sunlight bounced off rows of handbags, each one unique, each stitched with her story of survival. That was the day she met Mason. He wasn't from Maplewood. She could tell from the moment he spoke. His voice carried the rhythm of the city, warm and steady. He walked in with an easy smile, genuinely interested in her work. "I'm looking for something special," he said, explaining he wanted a gift for his sister. When he asked if she made the handbags herself, Madison nodded. "Every single one. No two are alike." He left with the purchase tucked under his arm, leaving a quiet compliment that lingered with her long after the shop closed. Over the next few days, Mason returned, sometimes to buy, sometimes just to talk. Madison learned he was a chef at a well-known Boston restaurant, a place celebrated for its cozy atmosphere and devotion to local ingredients. He spoke about food the way she spoke about design, not as a product, but as an act of creation. One evening, after another easy conversation at the shop, Mason asked if she'd join him for dinner. Madison hesitated. The wounds Ryan had left behind still felt raw, her trust fragile. But with encouragement from a friend, she accepted. The dinner was nothing extravagant, just a warm restaurant corner and the comforting murmur of other diners. But Mason made it memorable. He spoke about cooking as if it were poetry, how the joy wasn't only in the finished dish but in the transformation of simple, humble ingredients into something extraordinary. Madison found herself leaning in, smiling, captivated by his respect for the process, his reverence for craft. What drew her in wasn't charm or grand gestures. It was his steadiness, his patience. He never pushed. He let her set the pace. Slowly, laughter returned to her life. She began sharing her ideas without fear of being mocked, and for the first time in years, she felt seen. But Ryan wasn't ready to let go. Back in Boston, he grew restless with the silence. He had expected Madison to break, to call him, to beg forgiveness, or at least seek his approval. Instead, she vanished without a trace, leaving him with nothing but the echo of his own arrogance. One day, through idle conversation with an old acquaintance, Ryan learned the truth. Madison had moved to a small town, reopened her business, and worst of all, was seeing someone new. The words hit him like gasoline on fire. It wasn't love that burned in him anymore. It was wounded pride. How dare she move on without him? How dare she succeed? He started digging. Online, he found her professional profile, glowing with accomplishments. Pictures showed her standing proudly in front of her shop, smiling in a way she hadn't smiled in years. Then came the photo that sent ice through his veins. Madison and Mason at a restaurant, their hands intertwined, their faces lit with quiet happiness. Enraged, Ryan made a snap decision. He dressed sharply, as if armor could disguise desperation, and drove straight to Boston. He marched into Mason's restaurant like a man claiming lost property. Madison was there that evening, seated at a table with a friend. The moment she saw him, her stomach clenched. Ryan stood tall, arrogance painted on his face, and demanded in a voice loud enough to turn heads, "Did you really think you could hide from me?" The air thickened. Mason stepped forward, calm but firm, his presence protective. "Maybe you should lower your voice," he said evenly. Ryan sneered, brushing him off as if he were invisible. "This is between me and my ex-wife." Madison rose from her chair, her heart pounding but her voice steady. "You have no right to show up here, Ryan. My life isn't yours to control anymore." He fired back with accusations, about her new shop, her new relationship, her new independence, as though her existence still belonged to him. Madison didn't waver. "My life was never yours to own," she said, her words slicing through the tension. Ryan left without another word, but the damage was done. His pride bruised, his anger sharpened into vengeance. He began pulling strings, using his contacts at the bank to peer into her finances. That was when he discovered the house in Maplewood, Patricia's house, which had never appeared during the divorce proceedings. With the help of a crooked attorney, Ryan filed a lawsuit accusing Madison of hiding assets during their marriage. He argued that since the house had been used while they were together, he had a right to half of it, even though the deed had never been transferred from Patricia's name. Days later, Madison received the notice. Her hands trembled as she unfolded the letter, her chest tightening with every word. Ryan was trying to take half of her mother's house, the one place in the world that still carried Patricia's presence. The thought of him invading that sacred space nearly broke her. When she told Mason, he held her hands firmly, his eyes steady on hers. "You're not alone. We'll fight this together." But that night, as she walked through the quiet house, her resolve wavered. She trailed her fingers along the familiar walls, hearing echoes of her mother's laughter, smelling the ghost of morning coffee. Tears blurred her vision. The idea of Ryan laying claim to Patricia's memory was unbearable. Still, Madison whispered to herself, "No more running. It's time to face him." With Mason at her side, she sought help from a respected attorney in Boston. The lawyer combed through the records and, after hours of research, uncovered the key detail: the house was still legally in Patricia's name. Since no transfer had ever taken place, Ryan had no rightful claim. "He'll try to twist the story, play on emotions," the lawyer warned, "but the law is on your side." For Madison, those words were a lifeline. Ryan could throw his tantrums, but he would not strip her of the last piece of her mother. This time, she wasn't fighting alone. The first hearing was set for a crisp autumn morning in Boston. The courthouse loomed heavy and imposing, its stone columns casting long shadows across the steps. Inside, the air buzzed with tension, the shuffle of papers, the echo of shoes across marble floors, the murmurs of attorneys waiting for their cases to be called. Ryan arrived as if he owned the place. His tailored suit was perfectly pressed, his smug lawyer trailing behind him like a shadow. As he passed Madison in the hallway, he slowed just enough to sneer, his voice low and cutting. "Didn't see this one coming, did you?" Madison refused to look away. Her chin lifted, her eyes steady, even though her hands trembled slightly in her lap. Beside her, Mason sat with quiet strength, his presence grounding her like an anchor in stormy waters. When their case was called, the tension rose a notch. Ryan strode forward with arrogance, his lawyer reciting claims with rehearsed confidence. In front of the judge, Ryan's voice dripped with venom as he accused Madison of hiding property, insisting she had benefited from it during their marriage and that he deserved half its value. But Madison's attorney remained calm. "Your Honor," he began, his voice steady but firm, "the property in question has never legally belonged to my client. It remains registered under the name of her late mother, Patricia. There was no transfer, no inheritance process. Therefore, there was no concealment of assets. By law, this property is not, and has never been, part of the marital estate." Ryan's face flushed red. His temper flared, his control slipping through his fingers. He slammed his palm against the table, startling the room. "She's always been manipulative," he shouted. "She's hidden things from me our entire marriage." The courtroom fell silent. Madison's heart pounded, but she forced herself to stand tall. Tears pricked at her eyes, but she spoke, her voice steady. "And you've always been a tyrant, Ryan. Controlling, arrogant. And now, you want to steal even the memory of my mother." The judge raised a hand, restoring order, and the proceedings continued. When it was over, Madison stepped out of the courtroom shaken but proud. Her knees felt weak, her body drained, yet her spirit remained unbroken. That night, Mason drove her home in silence. The hum of the car was comfort enough. He didn't need to speak, he simply gave her the space to breathe. Collapsing onto her sofa, Madison exhaled deeply. Something inside her shifted. For the first time in years, She realized she wasn't afraid of Ryan anymore. But Ryan wasn't done. He took his fight online, spreading lies that she was living in luxury at his expense. His plan backfired. Maplewood knew the truth. Customers defended her, neighbors vouched for her character, and friends rallied around her. Mason organized a benefit dinner at his restaurant, highlighting Madison's craft and the story behind Patricia's handcrafted. The event was intimate and warm, filled with laughter and community. Guests left not only with full bellies but a renewed respect for Madison's resilience. She rose again, not just as a businesswoman, but as a woman who refused to be silenced. One evening, after closing the shop, Madison admitted something to Mason. "For so long I thought I had to hide my pain to seem strong. But now I understand. Real strength is not letting anyone make me feel small." Mason pulled her close, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. "You're more than strong, Madison. You're an inspiration." The day before the verdict, Madison drove to the quiet cemetery where her mother rested. Late September air carried a chill, and wind rustled through the maples, scattering leaves across the gravel paths. She walked slowly, a single white lily in hand. Kneeling before Patricia's headstone, she traced her mother's name with her fingertips, the granite cool beneath her touch. For a moment, she simply breathed, listening to the whisper of the branches above. Then, in a voice steady but tender, she whispered, "Mom, I'm doing this my way. And for the first time, I'm at peace." She laid the lily gently at the base of the stone, letting her words drift into the breeze. When the ruling came, the courthouse was taut with tension. Wooden benches creaked as people shifted nervously. Ryan sat at the defense table, restless, his jaw tight as he tried to mask his nerves with a familiar smirk. His foot tapped under the table, betraying the storm he fought to hide. Across from him, Madison was calm, her back straight, hands folded in her lap. She drew in a deep breath and let it steady her heartbeat. She wasn't fearless, but she was ready. The heavy oak doors opened. The judge entered, robe flowing, glasses perched at the end of his nose. Clearing his throat and adjusting the papers before him, he spoke. Considering the property in question was never legally transferred to the defendant during the marriage, the plaintiff's claim is dismissed. The asset remains registered under the late Patricia and is excluded from the marital division. The words hit harder than the gavel itself. Ryan closed his eyes, muttering something inaudible. His shoulders sagged. His mask of control slipped away. He hadn't just lost the case. He lost the story he tried so hard to rewrite in his favor. Madison's lips curved in a faint smile. Not triumph, not gloating, just release. A long-held breath finally escaped. Outside, the crisp air felt like a baptism. Ryan followed, his steps heavy, bitterness coloring every word. "Think you're clever? One day this will all come crashing down." Madison met his glare with steady eyes, clear as glass. Her voice was calm, unwavering. "You have no power over me. Not my life, not my peace. If you'd ever known love, you'd have left me in peace from the start." Ryan froze. Her words hit harder than the verdict. Then he turned, shoulders hunched, defeated, not just by the court, but by the woman he tried and failed to break. In the days that followed, support poured in from all directions. Customers came to her bakery not just for bread and pastries, but to shake her hand and tell her she inspired them. Neighbors left notes. Strangers sent letters. Women who had faced similar battles saw themselves in her fight and called her brave. Orders multiplied. Her business flourished. Before long, she opened a second shop, with Mason at her side, not only as her partner but as her investor, believing in her the way no one else had dared. Months later, when the inheritance process was complete, Madison unlocked the door to her mother's house. Late afternoon sun spilled through the curtains, bathing the familiar walls in golden light. The scent of old wood and lavender, her mother's favorite, lingered in the air. Every creak of the floorboards carried a memory. Bedtime stories, Sunday dinners, quiet conversations at the kitchen table. She stood there, still as stone, until Mason came up behind her. He wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin gently on her shoulder. "So," he murmured, voice low and tender, "what's next?" Madison closed her eyes, savoring the moment. her heart finally light. When she spoke, her words were soft but unshakable. Now we live without fear, without chains, without the past. She had been underestimated, silenced, controlled, but she had risen. She had reclaimed her voice, her freedom, and her future. This time, no one could take it from her. You just heard this one from Stories by Sue. If it resonated, don't forget to like and subscribe. What are your thoughts? Share them in the comments. I'd love to hear. Thanks for watching.